what is iconic reactive for Google? And when you think about how many people visit that homepage, how many people get to experience Google every day when they go to the homepage, being able to show the winner of the World Cup and being able to show the first place, you can add a star to that like official federation shield. It was a moment, you know. For me, it felt like we had the privilege to be a part of that moment with Spain winning the World Cup.
We like to think culture just happens to brands, but every once in a while, a brand comes along that actually dictates the tempo of culture itself. To pull that off, you need a deep, almost fanatical understanding of human behavior, whether you're designing for the world's most elite athletes or connecting millions of football fans during the World Cup. Today's guest has done both. As vice president of Google Brand Studio and a veteran of Nike's legendary creative engine, Jonathan Johnsongriffin knows a thing or two about taking a 10-second viral moment and turning it into a movement. Johnsongriffin has worked closely with Serena Williams, Kobe Bryant, and LeBron as he's mastered his craft over the years. We talk about his design philosophy, leading through crisis, discovering talent in unexpected places, and why brand storytelling is more vital than ever. I'm Jameson Fleming, and this is Campaign Chemistry. All right, I'm really excited for this conversation. Welcome in Jonathan Johnsongriffin. Really going to have a good time here on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's good to be here.
We're going to start out the way we have for the last few episodes, which is going to have a fun little game to get to know Jonathan a bit. We're going to start out with some would you rather. I'm going to give you two topics, and I want to know what kind of success you would rather have in your career. So we'll start with a $10 million cinematic Super Bowl ad that tops USA Today ad meter, or a viral 15-second TikTok that takes over the internet.
I think at this point in my career, I take the viral 10 second, because I do think that that viral 10 second can help recreate more viral moments coming after that. Whereas a lot of times the moment in the Super Bowl is the moment in the Super Bowl, and it comes and it goes.
Yeah. How about 100-page deck filled with data, or a 2-line napkin pitch that you wrote up or a creative partner wrote up that you just have that gut feeling is going to be genius?
Oh, definitely the two-line idea. Because like all that data has to come back to actually an actual idea in the end of the day anyway. So definitely the napkin script.
All right. How about launching a sneaker drop that crashes the app in 30 seconds, or a physical pop-up with a 5-block line in Soho?
Physical pop-up
Yeah. Though I
for
guess
sure. Real
in today's day and age, you're probably aiming for both at the same time.
For sure, for sure. I think that, a lot of times we used to say real love is physical, and digital is a way to wrap yourself around that world. And I think that like being able to have that physical pop up, you actually get to talk to consumers and see how they're reacting and see that like folks are like really, really engaged or not engaged with whatever it is we're popping up about.
Yeah. And last one, how about you're at an event, you got to wear the best pair of sneakers you got. Are you going your original Air Jordan 3s that built your love for Nike, from what I read? Or do you want a prototype that has not been released, that's designed with your favorite athlete?
These days, I'm probably going with my AJ1 off whites, just because like, and it's like to me, what Virgil represented to an evolving creative industry, like that's something I hold really close to my heart, because he was an innovator that didn't come from a traditional background, that took a shoe like the Air Jordan 1 and did things to it that like I don't think we saw before. And so every time I wear those, it just kind of makes me think differently about creativity and innovation and how that can be applied.
Love that. I love that. And that kind of flows right into what I first want to talk about, because I definitely want to get into what you're doing at Google and all the work that you did in the past at Nike. Well, maybe not all the work, because that's a lot, but I want to dive into your history at Nike. But I think that to table set this conversation, I want to understand your creative and design philosophy. What's ultimately influenced you over the years, and how do you think about creativity and craft of your work as a result?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one thing I'd have to start with is that like being a creative, or at least for me, being a creative involves having an unhealthy obsession with creativity, you know? And I think an unhealthy obsession with creativity means whether it's words, objects, visuals, cinematography, you're kind of always picking things apart and trying to move things around so they like fit into this world of like beauty and or just disruption and or just like storytelling. I think that for me, if you were to ask my wife if we're designing something in our living room and we go to a retail store to buy a sofa, she gets frustrated with me because I'm like moving the sofa in the actual store and putting lamps around it and trying to lay out the like actual rug because I'm trying to see what everything looks like in situ. I'm trying to like, I'm obsessed with making sure that this vision kind of comes to life in real D, And so I think that like that's kind of been my approach over the years, and from starting as a footwear designer at Nike to landing in brand design to then going into overall digital storytelling, then to the brand defining storytelling. Like I think the connection for me has just been this unhealthy obsession with like making sure things feel amazing, and like sometimes that doesn't mean that like you're using all types of tools. Like sometimes I'm using literally paper and scissors, sometimes I'm using, nano banana, sometimes I'm using old school tools like Photoshop, but like doing whatever it takes to ensure the creative vision comes to life in full and in the best situation for a user or for somebody like myself, even for when I'm doing something for myself.
Yeah. And I mean, you've been lucky from the standpoint you've worked for two organizations, Nike and Google, that I think have always valued craft above almost anything
Sure.
else in the final production of a campaign, a product, whatever it may be. Not every marketer has that luxury. What is the message to those people who are trying to make that argument to spend that little extra money on a piece of design, on a sound design, on doing something shot on location instead of in front of a green screen? What's that argument that you want to inspire them with to get that work to the next level?
Yeah, definitely. A good question. I mean, I think every team that I've been able to work for or work with, I'm a big Field of Dreams fan, growing up, looking in that Midwest period, Field of Dreams was a aspirational hit. And there's a part in the movie when they say, if you build it, they will come. And I think that like that has stuck with me for a long time because, whether you're in a cornfield in Iowa and you're trying to build an actual baseball diamond, or you're, just trying to build a vision of something for people to see. I remember I was working on the Flyknit Air Force Ones when I was at Nike. And Air Force One is a shoe that is loved. Every stitch on that shoe, every color on that shoe, like is obsessed by collectors. So when we were going to make a new innovative take on the Air Force One that used the sustainability, textile construction, it was like, whoa, 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 like what are you doing? I can't believe you're doing, no, we don't want to do that. Like, so I had to like build it. And so like with tape and textile and like forms, I had to put it together and actually put something on the table for not only myself to see, but for all the folks across the business to see that it was possible. And so and I still have that mock-up somewhere in my garage, but when we put that mock-up on the ground, no matter how crude it was, people could then start to squint and see what it could become. And from that very moment on, it was a full-fledged project where more resources got dedicated to it, more developers got dedicated to it, more technology developers got dedicated to it. And we still use that crude mock-up through the entire process, whether we were building it in Asia and we were doing final samples, we were still going back to that crude mock-up because it had so many of the details that we were aspiring to achieve to hit the mark. So I would say if you build it, they will come.
Yeah, I love that. Love that philosophy. And before we talk current work with Google, I just also want to ask some of the people in your life and people you've met over the years that have really influenced not only your design and kind of your creative mind, but also your leadership. I know, kind of reading and doing some research on you, Serena Williams seemed to have had a pretty big impact on your life. So I would love to hear more about your relationship with Serena and maybe others who really have guided you over the years or influenced you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Serena for sure. Working back with Serena, in my Nike days, we created a program called the Serena Williams Design Crew, which was really about, giving people from all different types of background and opportunity in the design space at a company like Nike. And what, I remember one story was one of the gentlemen that started in the Serena Design Crew, he didn't come from a traditional design school background, and but he loved design, had always liked design growing up. And at the time he was working at like a creditor, like he was one of the folks that call you when you don't pay your bills. And and next thing you know, he's working with us and Serena to design a collection for her. Fast forward, he's working on a collection for LeBron. And those credit card payments that he was calling people on are way, way, way behind him. But like that opportunity that Serena really helped open up for so many people that now work at Nike or now work in the industry that we love was probably one of my favorite projects. We did it for I think around 5 years, and it actually changed the shape. And I would say the identity of the footwear and apparel design industry. I also say, Kobe was one that, I didn't work with him as long as I did Serena, but Kobe had that unhealthy obsession that I talk about. Like Kobe was obsessed. Like out of all the athletes I've ever worked with, when we sat down with Kobe for a presentation, we knew he was going to be asking questions that we just were not going to be prepared to answer, because every single time, like he was like obsessed with the details. He was obsessed with achieving a different level of performance in his shoes that others didn't. And a lot of times, this was this was at a level where, we were like, Kobe, like we don't even have that capability yet. But like it was an unhealthy obsession. And I mean, there's a host of others. I had a boss, one of my favorite bosses was Greg Hoffman, Gino as well, who used to work at Nike. These are folks that were like gigantic storytellers, and their obsession was also there. Their obsession to make sure the story was told across the funnel, their obsession that the story was told at a level and grade that was so aspirational. And I'll even say, like our current CMO at Google, Lorraine, like she is obsessed with us hitting a certain level of grade that I think you just don't see that with everybody in this industry. And I think that obsession is something that it's unhealthy. Let me be clear, it is unhealthy, but it's that obsession that breeds greatness.
Yeah. And I want to start talking Google, and we're going to start with some sports stuff at Google. That's right in your wheelhouse after your Nike time. Naturally, Google isn't just going to release a single spot and call it a day regarding the World Cup. The work was extensive between a number of spots, broadcast integrations, Google Doodles. I think I see here 69 doodles featuring 28 unique pieces of artwork across 189 markets. Not a small
Wow.
feat in itself. Easter eggs. I love the art of the nutmeg doodle, I think, more than anything that you all did. Uh, Walk me through, how do you come up with all these unique parts that are, things that only Google can do? And is there a specific part of that campaign that you feel like you would point to and go, yes, this is exactly that what represents what we're trying to do here at Google with our marketing communications?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it was a build, and I think the beauty of like at least my experience at Google was I've been able to like go from 25 years in search piece of creative that we did to celebrate 25 years of searching and an ecosystem and blueprint that came out of that. And then we did some work with Stranger Things last year, a different ecosystem around, what people had searched for the last 10 years of Stranger Things. And so we had this big moment called the World Cup in line of sight for a long time, because it is one of the highest search traffic moments in the world, period. We also know that soccer or football, however you want to call it, is the most searched sport in the world. And we also know that like some of the athletes that play soccer, football are the most searched athletes in the world. So like we knew that like the World Cup itself is one of the moments that people search for the most because of the world it creates, because of the pride that it creates, because of just the 39 days of just like football. And I mean, for all of us are, or at least me, I'll say my family, we're all like, what are we supposed to do with the rest of the summer now that, the Knicks have won the finals and the World Cup is over? Like sport just kind of like absorbed so much of our lives. And I think that if I were to look back, so we're working back from blueprints that we've built with Year in Search, that we've built with Stranger Things in Search, that we've built with all of these different executions. And World Cup became one of those opportunities for us to show the world modern search and to be able to show the world like the best of search. And so if I think back to like, and again, right, World Cup ended on Sunday, so it's still pretty fresh in my mind for me. But probably the moment to me that tips the scale the most in the World Cup was the final, and the reason why is because I felt like it was where all of our efforts kind of came together at once because it was the doodle, it was the lights that were still happening. It was the 60 and on broadcast that happened during the commercial break. That's when, or I guess it was hydration break. Probably the most of the world got to see that piece the most because of how many people watched that World Cup final. We also were programming the doodle. So, before the game started, we had a doodle that featured Spain and a doodle that featured Argentina. And it was what we would call our Fabric of the Game series doodles, where it's like, how do we get to the most authentic expression of fandom, like Argentinian fans or Spanish fans, and when they see the Google homepage, they feel a sense of pride and fandom come out. And so that was a big, and we had been building that throughout the World Cup, but like that was the first time where we actually featured a little bit of a head to head because it was now we're at the World Cup final. We had built up into that moment. And then we also programmed the doodle for when whoever won, we were actually going to show how the new star was going to be applied to their shield. And coming from my days at Nike, I'm very aware of how much that star means
Hmm.
to a World Cup team. It's like, we were talking a lot about like what is our version of a reactive? Like I think a lot of folks saw the Knicks reactive ad that Nike did, which was amazing. And it's like that was iconic for Nike. What is iconic reactive for Google? And when you think about how many people visit that homepage, how many people get to experience Google every day when they go to the homepage, being able to show, the winner of the World Cup and being able to show the first place you can add a star to that like official federation shield. It was a moment, for me, it felt like we had the privilege to be a part of that moment with Spain winning the World Cup. And then I'll say lastly, so if, we had the broadcast piece that happened at the hydration break, the most, probably the most exposure that has had because of the broadcast viewers. We had the doodle strategy. And then I would say also we had like reactives that we had pre-planned where we had a special stand for Lamine Yamal, and we also had a special stand for the Spain like Federation, and I think we were able to bring those out as well as Spain won the World Cup, and we saw a lot of traction on social for those. So it's like where our full offense kind of came to life, and it was really good to see it come to life in that moment, and it felt like all the kit of parts coming together.
Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating how you all thought through seemingly every angle to make this a true experience for anybody who's using Google and search. And the one thing that I always admire about brands is when you can start to watch an ad and you distinctly know what brand it's for. And I think Google has one of those, has that right now and has had for years, of the fact that Google can tell a story through search And really, no other brand can do that. I mean, some of the LLMs can maybe start to think about how they tell a story through search, but it's something Google has 100% owned for since the first campaigns came out. So when you think about that work, how do you continue to use that format? And I know it's not used for every ad, but it's consistently used, but keep it fresh and tell unique stories in ways that doesn't just feel like, oh, it's the same. They're going to search something and it's going to tell a story. Like how do you make that fresh every time?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that like one, I think a lot of the architecture that we use behind our search trends data, whether it's like you get the monocle of most searched, like this is the most search, or you're a breakout search, and it's something that like is kind of fresh and new that didn't exist last year. Like when K-pop Demon Hunters came out, that was a breakout search. None of us knew that like K-pop Demon Hunters existed until it did, versus, the most searched superhero, Spider-Man. Spider-Man's been around for a while. The Batman fans were not happy to hear that Spider-Man was the most searched superhero, but I think that that also created a bit of a dynamic. And with that, what we're starting to see is, there's celebrating search trends that people are searching, and then there's like tapping into fandoms through those search trends. And when you can tap into those fandoms, like it becomes a conversation, it becomes less of a transactional, like one way ad, and it becomes a conversation, and the comments light up, and the fans are telling us what to do next, and we're responding reactives, and we can build a search delight to react to it, or we can, like, there's things that like start to happen. And I think that like that's one of the freshest ways that I think that, at least for me, that I'm obsessed with, is like when we talk about search in a way that ignites these fandoms that like are obsessed with a lot of these subjects that they're clearly searching for. It allows us to create like mini worlds around that like just become really, really interesting. Like in the 25 years of search campaign we did, we created this thing called what we called the most search playground. And the most search playground was, a web portal that you go to that essentially allowed you to be able to search through all of the things in this illustrative visual map of all the most searched things in the last 25 years. So from everything from Barbie to Cristiano Ronaldo to Beyonce, you had all of these different pieces that you could find. And, when you found the Taylor Swift piece, when you found her hidden in the playground, like you could click through it and go to a website, and then it would talk about all the different search trends at a deeper level for Taylor Swift. And then eventually you get to this mini stand video that we did that celebrates all of these different types of trends really based upon Taylor Swift. So I think we're just honestly, I think we're just scratching the surface. I think because there's the methodology of how we do it, there's how we do the storytelling, there's how we engage with the fandoms. I mean, simple things like I wrote this one down. I was like, you know, why Scotland searched Cape Verde the most in the World Cup? And I'm not saying that's a way that like that's not something we're pulling, but that's something we could pull, and that's a very interesting story because it's like, oh, why Scotland searching Cape Verde the most? Oh, it's because Scotland has this unique connection or insight potentially to that like makes them fans of Cape Verde or makes them more curious about Cape Verde. So I think there's all types of different insights and discoveries that like create really good conversation, in particular on social, for us to celebrate search trends.
Yeah, and I want to talk now a little bit about your time at Nike and how it's influenced you even to this day. Now that you've been removed from, I mean, one of the most legendary marketing organizations of this millennia, are there things about it that maybe you didn't appreciate in the moment that you really appreciate now and that you've brought to Google, and you would tell anybody like these are things I learned at Nike that you got to be doing at every organization you're at?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think things I learned at Nike, um, I learned how to, in particular, work with athletes. And athletes, you could put creators in that bucket, you could put musicians in that bucket, you could put any sort of talent in that bucket. But at Nike, we got the opportunity to work with some of the best athletes on the planet. And there's a difference between like just working with them and then like building something with them. Like we built the Serena design crew with Serena. We built Kobe's line with him. We built things with, we built JDI with Colin Kaepernick. These are things that like it's a difference between just working with talent and then being able to build with them and get the best ideas on the table, and everyone like go through that door together. That was one of the main things I learned at Nike. I think the other thing I feel like in Nike that was really important is the obsession with consumers. A lot of times, I don't know if people realize that unless they're behind closed doors, but Nike is like Nike's obsessed with consumers, like to the point to where we would go and work at a Nike retail store for a day just to like see what like how people are engaging with product, to see how people are engaging with the brand. We'd hang out in locker rooms to see how like kids are like feeling about the brand, shoes they like. I mean, we were like a dog on a bone when it came to like the obsession with consumers. And like we were constantly, and because Nike's in Beaverton, Oregon, and because the global team traditionally sits in Beaverton, Oregon, we were obsessed with getting outside of Beaverton, Oregon. It's like, hey, like I'm a I love Oregon, but you have to get out in the world to truly be able to like taste the inspiration, taste the ideas, to taste the insights that are living with consumers every day. And I say that that's another thing that like has fed my unhealthy obsession with creativity, is continuing to chase consumers, to chase users, um, to find the magic.
Yeah, and Nike lives in culture better than probably almost any other brand on the planet. How did you make sure that you and your teams never felt complacent about that role or take it for granted that just because you're in culture for now in the past 10 or 15 or 40 years doesn't mean you still have that place for the next 10, 15, 40 years? How did you make sure that everybody really understood like pedal to the metals can't stop?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's interesting. Like, I'll use COVID as an example. You know, um, like I said before, like we were obsessed with getting away from our desk. We were obsessed with like talking to consumers in stores, in locker rooms, in their environments. When COVID hit, none of us could do that anymore, and it was like how do we keep up that obsession? And so I think one of the things that we did was we were able to create something called Gallery Nights. And Gallery Nights was basically, a virtual way for our creative teams to be able to like speak to people that were industry shapers that didn't necessarily sit square in the remit of our day to day. For example, like we would have Virgil come in and I'd interview him. We'd have different DJs, different musicians, different artists, different folks come in and we do this. And this is in the beginning of COVID. Like none of us knew if this was going to be, something that was going to last for the next 2 to 3 years. None of us knew that like we were going to now be in a hybrid work culture that would always have us on a screen, as well as in real life. This was back when like everybody was like, so how do we like, can we be in the same room together? And we don't even have a virtual infrastructure to actually be able to host meetings. Nike is very different than Google. Like Google had this figured out before then. Nike didn't even have an interface to have virtual calls, right? So like we were figuring all this out on the fly, but what the most important part was is that the community needed to continue to be fed and fueled. And, I was a little nervous the first one we did. The first one we did was with Colin Kaepernick. And, you know, it was gonna be like a new kind of series, and I was like, I don't know how many people are gonna show up for this. It was like 500 people showed up on virtually out of a organization of like 1,000. I was like, oh wow, okay, I guess people do want to do this. And so then we made poster series out of it. So everyone we did had a poster. We put those posters up around the office. It just turned into something that I would have never expected it to, but it was something that was fueling and feeding the creatives, the marketers, the designers that all were sitting together, just like really, like they really needed that.
Yeah, and I mean that's really fascinating to see how that unfolded because that was such an unprecedented time. And you know, when you think about getting into this industry, it's changed a lot because of AI. There's entry level roles are disappearing. You see a lot more creators trying to make their name out on TikTok and Instagram. What's your advice to anyone who's trying to get noticed? What catches your eye as somebody who's, you know, at the top of an organization and, you know, potentially out there looking for talent? What how do you get your attention? What catches your eye?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think like I'm in social quite a bit, like just open-eyed viewing a lot of different things. And with the way the algorithms work now, like you get a lot of different things, a lot of I don't have to follow you to be able to see things that you're making and creating. Um Also, like, I'm constantly going to Ad Color and Can and like different places to and making time to like be able to see work, to be able to talk to folks. I think a lot of times in our industry, like it's we can get so like absorbed by so many other things that like we tend to forget to like go look at work around the world. And like for example, I was at Cannes a couple of I guess a month ago. And a lot of times, like Cannes is one of those places where you can see a lot of work if you're paying attention, but you can also get distracted and do a lot of other things, right? And so I think often, like I'm encouraging our teams to like go downstairs and look at the work in the basement. Like just look at the work, absorb yourself in the work. If you're going to the Webbies, look at the work. If you're going like finding places to be able to see work, whether it's in social media, whether it's at a conference or one of the award shows, being able to discover that. Because I honestly I do think like it's my job to be able to like find the great creatives. It's my job to be able to see great creative in the wild. And the wild is not just like out home anymore. The wild is a TikTok. The wild is like a YouTube series. The wild is all these different places. But I think that like we have to like do a better job of paying attention to like seeing work in the world and understanding the value that like that work now can come from anywhere.
Yeah, I love that perspective. It's actually something we're bringing to our events across the Haymarket portfolio with Campaign and MM&M of, you know, we're going to display work that wins our awards because, you know, if you're at an award show, like I also, you know, oversee our medical marketing publication that we have an 800 person gala. Let's put the work out for people to see.
Totally, totally. And I mean, I think Jameson, I think that like, I've been in the industry for a while, so I feel like I can say this. Like, there is a culture in our industry at times to say like awards don't mean anything, no one cares. I think the like folks that are coming up in the industry now, they care. I feel like I think they actually have a certain level of competition that like it is like no I care about who wins this award because they want to be seen, and it's harder to be seen in this industry today because of it's an evolving industry. But I do think the work is the most important part, like being able to show the work. And I think being able to see that work and learn from it and actually have a little bit of healthy competition to say, oh, my work needs to get better, like that's a super valuable thing for any creative organization.
Yeah. And I think a lot of award shows have done a really nice job over the last 5 to 10 years of making more about work that actually works, not just work that's beautiful, which means those
Totally.
awards really are more meaningful for not just you, but the clients you did them for.
Totally. 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 And I think that's the tension, right? Because like I think, when we're at Nike, Nike won a lot of awards, but Nike never really like I mean, half the time we didn't even go to any of the award shows, And I think that like it was that tension of like making work for the consumer and the audience we're trying to serve versus the industry. And I do think there's a healthy tension there because like, whether it be the Effies, the Webbies, like you guys, like there's awards that are happening, but like making sure that award ties back to the actual work and the effectiveness of the work, it's very meaningful.
Yeah. And that's a great point to end the official conversation. But I have one last game for us to play here to end out the end our chat. See what really resonated most with you during your Nike days. So I'm going to give you two campaigns. You're going to tell me which one stands out more in your mind, and that will move on to the next round. So we're going to start with Nike MVP puppets with LeBron and Kobe versus Unlimited You from the Rio Olympics.
The puppets for sure.
All right, well,
Puppets.
let's do puppets versus Nothing Beats a Londoner, which I think is one of the more underrated Nike campaigns of the last 10 or
Oh, for
15
sure.
years.
Internally, nothing beats a Londoner was a big deal. Like people were like, "Holy shit, this came out of nowhere." But I still got to go with the puppets, Jameson. The puppets were just like, I still have. We were in my office back home. I have like a poster of the puppets in my room, and like that's probably why the puppets is still taking the win right now.
All right, let's go puppets versus Never Too Far Down.
Mm. I'm gonna still go puppets.
All right, we'll go puppets. This is a tonal shift that I think Nike had in the early 2020s. So puppets versus Play New.
Puppets. I
All
worked on
right.
Play New as well, and I'm still going puppets.
Man, I thought I'd get you to shift over time, but I might have picked the winner
Uh,
right out the bat. Puppets versus Tag from 2002, which won a Cannes Lion Film Grand Prix that year.
I'm gonna still say puppets, especially just and like again, I'm saying puppets a lot, but like it was a way that like we brought together Kobe and LeBron in a way that like I don't think we've done with athletes a lot. And you close your eyes and you think about that optimism and fun of Nike, like that's a hard tone to hit at times. Well, let's see what's next because it might go down in this next round.
Yeah, I was gonna say I got three left. One of these has to top puppets, but maybe not. Uh, Puppets versus You Can't Stop Us.
Mm, you can't stop us.
All right.
You can't stop us. You can't stop us. Like again, that was one that I worked on, but also just like the time that it happened, like we were in COVID, like we were in COVID, that split screen, like it was just, Tokyo 2020 became Tokyo 2021 plus it was like all the things. So yeah, you can't stop us for sure.
I think You Can't Stop Us has to be on. If there was a Mount Rushmore for editing for an ad, that one has to be on there.
100%. 100%. That like split screen and just showing the dichotomy of like how our sports are different but also similar and how, the sentiment of like as people we're different but we also have shared sentiment and like at that time everyone was looking for hope. The entire world was looking for hope and like that's what to me You Can't Stop Us was a love letter to the world around hope.
All right. You Can't Stop Us. First, winning isn't for everyone.
Oh, You Can't Stop Us for sure.
All right. All right. Last one. You Can't Stop Us. First, Dream Crazy.
Dream crazy. Dream crazy. I mean, like, like You Can't Stop Us was obviously one of my favorites, but Dream Crazy was the one that like my family called me on. The one that if I was on a plane, people stopped me on. It was the one also as well when it happened. It was like, oh man, are we gonna get fired? And then all of a sudden, I remember those moments like Jim Carrey saying, "I'm gonna go and buy me a new pair of Nike," and all these things shifted, and it was like tectonic plates shifted. It was to me. If if there's a Mount Rushmore just in general for building film cinematography and feeling from the advertising world, like you can I mean like Dream Crazy has to be there.
Yeah. I mean, I remember that dropped at like randomly, I think it was about 11 a.m. on a Tuesday or something like that. And I mean, when I was at Ad Week, there wasn't often where an ad could be released and sent us all scurrying. That was probably one of maybe five ads released in my time there that everybody dropped what they were doing to figure out how do we write about this thing and cover it in the moment because it was just so incredible and so just unbelievable to see, and it came
Yeah.
out of nowhere.
I mean, it started as a tweet, or like back when Twitter was called Twitter. Twitter,
Yeah.
it was literally it was an X post or a tweet, like, and it was that key visual of Colin. with Dream Crazy, and like that was it. Like and like people saw that it had a huge effect. And then we obviously dropped the Dream Crazy film after that, but like I don't think we had ever saw like that level of impact and reaction just from like a key visual posting in social. And like to me, like that was another thing that like a lot of the tectonic plates changed after that moment, whether it was just, you know, the point of view that Nike took at that point, or even just like the marketing plan and how it rolled out, and then how the creative actually it also felt like it had a strong point of view, and you saw that black and white creative just continue to stretch through different dreams.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. Just the way you thought about that at the moment, and the impact that it had. I think that's the perfect note to end on here. So thank you so much, Jonathan, for joining us here
Thank
on
you.
Campaign Chemistry today.
Awesome. It's been great to be here. Thank you, Jameson.